My husband and I have really decided we need to be really focused on the same page about our finances. We actually have our first class of financial peace this evening.
Oh, cool.
But together we have probably just under $1 million in debt, and we want to know how to get debt-free without filing bankruptcy.
Okay. How much of that is a mortgage?
The mortgage, about $210,000.
So you have $600,000 in what?
$335,000 is about in student loans. We both have advanced degrees, and then the rest is really credit cards and personal loans.
So you have $300,000 of credit cards and personal loans?
We have about $335,000 in student loans and then about $136,000 in credit cards, $44,000 personal loans, and $35,000 car loans.
Okay. How old are you all?
I'm 29.
Okay. So what in the world?
I wish that I knew what I know now. When I was younger, I wish that I knew what I know now. When I was stronger, the can such a pretty show to steal your heart away.
This video is all about personal debt and how to avoid being deep in the red like the lady at the beginning of the video. We want to avoid that, and this video is going to be all about this. So remember that debt is the money that you owe back to a lender. So if you take out a line of credit or take out a loan, debt is what you owe back to whoever you took the money from. And then personal debt is going to be just the total amount of all your debts added up. That's going to be your entire personal debt. So let's go look at the different types of debt that you can get in. And so the first type of debt is mortgage debt, student loan debt, business loan debt, medical debt, auto loan debt, and credit card debt. So I'm just going to give a quick little summary for each one of these. So mortgage debt is debt that you take on to buy a house, so you have to take out a mortgage. Student loan debt is debt that you take on to get a college degree. Business loan debt is debt that you take on if you want to start a business, so you take out a loan to start a business. Medical debt is going to be debt that you owe in medical or hospital bills. Auto loan debt is debt you take on so you can buy a car. And then credit card debt is debt that you owe to a credit card company. So I'm going to put each one of these into three categories. There's good debt, medium or unavoidable debt, and then bad or very avoidable debt. So mortgage debt, that is actually good debt because you're taking out debt and you're paying off a house. And at the end of it, you get to own the house. So that I would consider good debt. So student loan debt, I'm going to put in the medium category because you're going to have to go to college. Most likely you'll take out some loans. So it's somewhat unavoidable unless you don't go to college. Business loan debt is same. Again, if you want to take out a loan to start a business, you can, but you should know exactly what you're doing first. Medical debt, again, you can't really help it if you get medical bills or something happens to you, so that's somewhat unavoidable if something happens. And then auto loan debt, in today's world, it's very, very hard to not own a car, so most likely you're going to have to take out an auto loan at some point. And then the last one, credit card debt, I'm going to put this in bad or avoidable debt, because it's by far the most avoidable and it can become the most damaging if you get too deep into credit card debt. But one thing to note is all these in the medium or unavoidable category, these can all turn into bad debt if handled poorly. So make that note that all these can turn into bad debt if you are not careful. So let's look at each of these in a little more detail, and we're going to look at how to avoid bad debt with each one of these categories. And let's start at the top with mortgage debt. So the best way to avoid bad mortgage debt is just to make sure that you buy a house that you can afford. If you buy a house that's too expensive, then your monthly mortgage payments are very high and you're going to struggle to hit those each month. So just make sure you buy a house that you can afford when taking out mortgage debt. With student loan debt, a way to avoid bad debt is make sure you know what you want to do with your degree. Don't go into college without a plan. Make sure you know what major you want, what job you want, because otherwise, if you take out all the student loan debt and you don't really know what you want to do, once you finish, you're going to have all this debt and no plan or no way to pay it off. So make sure you know what you want to do with that degree. Business loan debt is very similar. Way to avoid it is make sure you have a detailed business plan. So if you're starting a business and you take out a business loan, make sure you know exactly what your business plan is. Don't just fly blind with it, because again, then you'll have all this debt and no plan. Not a good situation to be in. Medical debt is one of the most unavoidable, because if something happens to you, there's not much you can do about it. But just a piece of advice is try to avoid massive medical bills and having them pile up. That is not a good situation to be in. But again, if something happens to you, there's really nothing you can do about that. Auto loan debt is going to be similar to a mortgage. Just make sure you buy a car that you can afford. Don't go buy a car that's way out of your price range, because then you're going to be stuck with these high monthly payments off the loan that you took out. You want to make sure you've got those payments manageable and buy a car that you can afford. Finally, we got credit card debt, and the best piece of advice I can give for credit card debt is just don't let credit card debt build up. And let's take a look at credit card debt in a little more detail right here. So one thing to know about credit card debt, like I said, avoid large credit card debt at all costs. And this is because credit card interest can become compound interest in the form of debt. So the same way we looked at investing, that compound interest, how it benefits you when compound interest is in the form of debt, it's going to grow at the same rate of that compound interest formula. But the problem is now it's growing as debt and not investment. So you want to avoid that at all costs. And lastly, one thing I'm going to say is okay to have credit cards. I'm not saying avoid credit cards, but make sure you pay them off as soon as possible. Do not let your debt on credit cards build up. So now we're going to look at your financial situation. I'm going to try to break this down as simple as possible, because sometimes I think the simplest way is the best way. And we're just going to look at two categories. We're going to look at your savings and investments, and then we're going to look at all your personal debts. And this is really a very good way to think about your finances. So let's say your savings and investments are like this, and your debts are like this. So you have almost double the amount of debt as you do savings and investments. That is not a great situation to be in. But again, it's not the worst. A lot of people do have debt. You're not going to have zero debt. Very, very unlikely to have zero debt. But you want to get the debts manageable. So let's take a look at another situation. Let's say it's like this. This is a very bad situation to be in. You do not want it to where your savings and investments are very small and your debts are large, because likely that red chart will keep going higher and higher, and that's something you want to avoid. And then last, let's look at the flipped. This is what you would consider a very good situation to be in, where you have your savings and investments very high and your debts are very low. That's ideally the situation you're going to want to put yourself in the future. So let's wrap this up and just tips to avoid large debts. So again, first one, avoid large credit card debt at all costs. Second, don't buy things you can't afford. Third thing, set aside income each month to pay off your debts. So if you have some debts, make sure you set aside income each month to pay them off. Avoid extra interest payments, especially on credit cards. And then the last tip, buy things in cash if you can. Sometimes it helps you set yourself on a better budget and you don't just keep swiping the credit card for everything. So that is a brief summary of personal debts and how personal debts can add up. Obviously, it's a little more complicated than that, but this video hopefully gave you a good idea of what personal debt is and how you can avoid having large personal debts. And as always, have a nice day.